welcome. It's now 6 o'clock. Yes, good evening, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you once again. I've said it so many times already, but thank you for joining us together on the Learning to Drive journey. So this is part of Warwickshire's wider support for both families or new and young drivers. So tonight is especially designed for parents who are supporting or about to support a young person learning to drive. As we all know, as drivers or not, learning to drive is a shared journey. The guidance, reassurance, and example you provide now will shape the kind of driver your young person becomes long after they pass their test. I love that we have so many of you eager and wanting to learn and how to support your young driver. I think it's so positive to see. So thank you once again for joining. So my name is Ria and I will be your host this evening. Now, this is my second time hosting a webinar for Warwickshire Council. I'm so grateful to be back again. I also work alongside First Car, where we create campaigns for young drivers to be safe on the road. Not only that, but I am also, of course, the target audience for this webinar. So I passed my test not long ago. And so I understand the challenges us young drivers experience and the support perhaps we all need. So this is me, Ria Francis. Hello. So the early stages of driving really matter. Here's the first statistic for you. Around 1 in 5 newly qualified drivers is involved in a collision within their first year. Now, this isn't because they're careless, but because they simply haven't had enough time and experience to develop the judgment that experienced drivers build naturally over years. So tonight we'll be focusing on just 3 things in this hour. 3 things, nice and easy, simple to remember. So number 1 is how you as a parent can support safe driving behaviours from day 1 for your learners. Number 2, how to plan meaningful private practice that builds real world experience. And our last focus will be how to use simple feedback, conversations and agreements to support good decision making on the road. Now, to help us with these 3 topics, we have some brilliant speakers joining us, and I'm really excited to pick their brains and learn something from them all. And I'm sure you'll leave with the practical tools straight away. So what the aim is today is when you close your laptop and leave the meeting, you can implement change in a positive way. So please do keep using the chat. We love hearing from you. And before we hear from our first speaker, we are going to publish our first poll. So we want to learn a bit about you and your young person, where you and your young person are in the journey. So poll number 1, it is all anonymous. So all you need to do is just tap the option that feels closest to your situation. So it should come up in the chat and you can read through the answers and click what feels most relevant to you. There is no right or wrong answer. It's all just personal to you. So as you can see on the screen, poll 1, which best describes how learning to drive is currently managed in your family? Is it mostly led by the driving instructor? Is it mostly led by you as a parent? Is it shared approach between driving instructor, parent, and learner? Or perhaps you don't have any clear plan at all, or you've not started learning, or you've passed your test already. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 options for you to choose from. Which best describes how learning to drive is currently managed in your family? I believe it should have been posted in the chat already. All you have to do is just click on what you feel relevant to you. And to the people that are still joining us, I can see the number is still going up. Hello, welcome. You haven't missed anything. We are just introducing ourselves, and we have now published our first poll of the evening. The question is now on the PowerPoint for you to answer. I'd love to get to know where you are in your journey, you and your young person. So please do feel free to click. Helen says that she has a shared approach. I think that's a really good place to be at. Anyone else want to share? If you don't feel comfortable sharing, you can discuss with the people that you're watching it with, or perhaps just answer in your head. Okay, we're going to move on to our second poll, and our second question is, parents, how much communication do you currently have with your child's driving instructor? Is it none at all? Very little? Only practical details like lesson times? Is it some? Occasional updates or questions? Is it regular and ongoing? Or is it the last one? My child doesn't have a driving instructor yet. So if the poll feature isn't working for you, just type in the chat which one is relevant. I'd love to hear. Anne says no instructor yet. Okay, so you're preparing yourself. You're ahead of the game. Anyone else? For me, my parents didn't really have a lot to do with my driving instructor. Lisa says no instructor yet. Gemma, also no instructor yet. Okay, I can see a theme. Sharon, none at all. Yeah, I think that was, I can share that experience with my family as well. They didn't really have a lot of communication with my instructor, which I think actually was not good in the end. But we'll get through to that. We have I'm sure our guest speakers will discuss. Okay, I've introduced myself. We have outlined what this evening entails, and we've had our first poll. Yes, good. We're going in the right direction. Tick, tick, tick. So I'm now delighted to introduce our first speaker, Terry Cook. Terry, can you hear us?
Yeah, just fine. You're doing a cracking job so far, Ria.
Oh, thank you, Terry. So Terry is an experienced instructor and coach who has been running his own successful driving school for many years. Go you, Terry.
Thank you.
So my first question for you, Terry, is how are you first? That should be my first question. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great seeing all the interaction having on here and the interesting poll responses as well.
I know, it's good, isn't it? I'm so positive that people are joining and they want to learn. So with that being said, Terry, my first official question to you is how does a parent's driving influence a learner driver's perceptions and behaviors?
I think this is a great question because it starts really, really early. You think about when you've got your young child in the car with you, they're going to notice not necessarily your driving, but your behavior, the way you act in the car. And we can all think of when we were a child and we remember times our parents behaved a certain way, parents or guardians or siblings. We remember how they behaved a certain way, whether it's in the car or elsewhere. That sticks with us and it influences how we behave. And that same thing happens when we learn to drive. So you got the toddler in the car, someone cuts you up and you react aggressively towards them. What's your child learning to do? If you're in the pub and you've had 4 pints and you drive home because you feel okay to drive home, your child is seeing that is an acceptable way to drive. You are teaching them by demonstrating that. On the flip side, if you're in the pub and you say, nope, I'm not going to have a drink today because I'm driving home, you're demonstrating that. So I don't necessarily think they learn through watching you drive, but they learn the way you act and the way you behave behind the wheel, and in particular, the way you respond to situations, and even some of the chances you take as well, where you might even say afterwards, oh, maybe I should have done that. Those sort of chances, they'll pick up
Yeah.
on those rather than the actual physical actions.
Hmm. I definitely agree with that. I think parents don't realize how much of an influence they have and at how soon they can have that influence. Like you said, it can start as young as them being a toddler, which is crazy.
I
Right, my
mean,
second
sorry, I will just
question.
say one other thing quickly on that, that
No.
one of the things I get a lot from parents when if a parent reaches out to me for lessons rather than the pupil, they'll say, that I don't want them picking up my bad habits. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's too late. They've been picking them up for 17 years. It's too late at that point.
That's a really good point. Question two to you. What should parents be speaking to their learner driver's driving instructor about?
But I hope this isn't a cop out, so please challenge me if it is. But the first thing I would say is anything you want. I think that sometimes there's a hesitancy to contact the instructor. There's a hesitancy about what to ask because you don't want to look daft because you are driving. And again, one of the things we hear, not just parents, but people say a lot is, I won't pass my test if I took it again. So I think
Yeah.
because of that, people are hesitant to ask questions. So it's the same thing we'll tell our learners. There's no daft question. You can ask us anything. So I would start off with that, but I suppose to give you a few suggestions to go along with that. The first thing I would look at is what are you going to, so from a parent's perspective, what are you going to actually be teaching my child? How are you going to be making sure my child is safe in the car? And establishing that. And I get those questions very occasionally, and I get excited by them. It's a chance for me to like, I know the parents engaged, I know the pupil's going to be engaged, and that's a chance for me to be like, yes, this is what we're doing. And finding out what the instructor is actually going to be teaching. Is the instructor just going to be teaching the bare minimum to get to a driving test? Or are they actually going to teach him some real life skills and teach him how to think like a driver and make smart decisions as well? Or somewhere in between? And I suppose the other one I chuck in there is what else are you offering? Is it just ABC driving lessons, or is there anything else beyond that? Do you provide some sort of theory training? Do you use other resources like The Honest Truth, which some people may be aware of? You think you said before you were a first car, you're probably aware of The Honest Truth. Do we use these external resources? And I think it's establishing what that instructor is like. Are they the basics to go for a test, or are they actually getting you further along? So you're gonna not be one of the 1 in 5 people that crash within a year, like you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah. That's really powerful actually. I think you kind of set it up as if you weren't going to drop some gems there, and you totally did, Terry.
You
So
get me
our
talking, I don't
last
stop. Sorry, go on.
no, it's good. I'm like, yes, carry on, carry on. Our last question. Um, I think this is a really difficult question, but hey, I think you can handle it. How can parents help a learner driver know if they are test ready? Because I think us as young drivers, we're like, oh yeah, we're ready after like a week because we're just so confident and we're just so eager to get on the road, which is just unrealistic. So, what do you think about that?
I think I want to focus on that phrase for a second, test ready. Because what is test ready? I think that's the big thing. What is test ready? Because sorry, I've just seen someone in the chat say they're instructed, they signed up to Honest Truth, which is brilliant. But yeah, what is test ready? So to pass a driving test, you need to be able to drive for 40 minutes without crashing, doing anything dangerous, or doing anything illegal. Now, I'm simplifying it, but that is the basis of what you have to do to pass a driving test. So if you can do that for 40 minutes, you can pass a test. But as you said at the start, 1 in 5 people crash within a year after passing the test. 5 people die a day. I'm sorry to be brutal with that, but 5 people die on UK roads, and the bulk of those are either caused or they are young people. So it's easier to be ready for a test than it is actually to drive. So how can parents help and how can parents know? I go back to what I said before, looking at what the pupil is learning. A really easy example might be bay parking, and I think this is in the process of being changed. Actually, Amanda maybe will touch on this later potentially. I don't know, but I think this is in the process of being changed. But it used to be the case that you go to a pay park on your driving test, and the examiner will have to find you 3 empty bays. So you would park in the middle of 3 empty bays.
Hmm.
But when you pass your test, that's not always going to be possible. We know what it's like. You go to Asda or other supermarkets are available, on a Saturday morning or Christmas rush hour or whatever. You're struggling to find a bay, and then when you do, you park in between 2 cars. So it's the difference between learning to pass a test and learning to drive. And I think that the more challenges you can give your son, daughter, the more challenge you can give them that is beyond just that 40 minutes, the better prepared that's going to be for a test, and you will know that they're ready. I had one quick example. I had a pupil last year, I think it was, who she explicitly told me that before she takes the test, she wanted to drive to Manchester and back. That's how she will know she's ready to drive.
Oh
She
my
found the
God.
test easy. She's like, you can drive to Manchester and back. How easy is your driving test? Now, obviously, there's a little bit more nuance to it than that, but it's that mindset going above and beyond. And also, and the last thing I'll mention on this, if you can get it so you're that confident doing that, for example, trip to Manchester or parking in between 2 cars, then when you go on your test, that's going to seem a lot easier. And that's
Yeah.
going to help reduce nerves and you'll feel more confident on the day as well. I think that answers your question.
Yes, it does. That was a good end. So thank you, Terry. I love how you highlighted the importance of like blending instructor lessons with planned practice at home, and how parents really influence their children, and they need to be aware of that. So I think, yeah, you've done really, really well. Thank you for that. So just a quick summary. Here are 3 key points that I think really stood out for me, for that parents need to kind of take on board. The first one is learning to drive works best when it's a team effort, which again, going back to what Terry said, driving instructor plus parent support. You said, Terry, that you enjoy when parents ask about what their child is going to learn. It shows the interest, and then that relays into the child as well, the enthusiasm. The second one is planned practice beats quick trips. Quality, variety, and purpose matter. And the last point is meet with your learner driving instructor where you can. Shared messages help learners stay consistent. Terry, have you ever met any of your clients' parents or?
In a variety of ways, and I think that everyone's going to be an individual. I think that's important to say. There'll be some parents that really do get involved. There'll be some that can't for whatever reason, and that's okay. But yeah, there's been times when I've gone to meet parents and the pupil at the house, in particular if a pupil's been really nervous. I've met them together before lessons. The most common one is when the pupil turns up. I often say, ask your mum and dad if they want to come out for a chat first. I never force that, and I don't think an instructor should force that. I think it's good to encourage it, and it's good to always make it there as an option. But I'm not perfect. Sometimes I forget, and I love it when a parent chases me up as well. So anyone that is a parent on this, and I'm sure there's lots of you, do not be afraid to message your instructor. And if there's an instructor that doesn't like that or doesn't want to get back to you, I'll let you make your own mind up about that instructor, but that probably says something.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you, Terry. We will be coming back to you at the end of the webinar. But before we have our next speaker, let's take one more quick poll. It's already on the screen. This is good. So, parents, thinking of your own learning to drive experience, how did you learn to spot hazards when driving? Were you taught during your driving lessons? Were you through completing your theory test, driving solo after passing your test, mostly through years of driving experience, or you're unsure? Now you can use the poll in the chat, or you can just simply type in whatever your answer is. Anne says she was taught. Anyone else? Yes, thank you once again, Terry. Oh, I didn't know you was a podcaster. This is why the conversation was so good. We'll be hearing more from Terry, which is great. Gemma says experience. Sinead, taught and experience. Lovely. We'll wait for a few more answers to roll in before we move on to our next speaker. Richard cycled. JE experienced. What was Richard's point? Right. Okay, I am so pleased to introduce Dr. Victoria Kroll. Oh, you've taken your camera off. She's ready. She's ready. So she will be talking all about hazard perception, a crucial part of learning to drive. So hello, welcome, Victoria. Can we hear you?
Yes, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can. Yes.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, what a lovely introduction to kind of hazard perception with the poll. And it's really great to hear that people are saying experience, because as you'll find out over the next little few minutes, that is one of the things how hazard perception actually develops. And as you may have guessed, I'm going to be talking about it. So I am what we call a traffic and transport psychologist, which is basically just a fancy way of saying we apply psychology and psychological theory to making drivers and the roads safer. And I run a company that is basically making hazard perception tests, and we do this for a variety of different kind of drivers. But what is hazard perception? Can we go to the next slide, please? So you're probably all aware that you have to pass a hazard perception test to get a full UK license. But what actually is it? Well, it's a few things. First of all, it is a test. It's something that you have to pass, but also it is a skill. And most importantly, it is something that can be trained. Now, I'm going to be focusing on hazard perception as a test because I think that's relevant for today's particular webinar. So what does the normal test look like? Well, the traditional test, it's shown from the perspective of a driver, and it usually shows real driving, or in the DVSA test, computer-generated imagery. And what you do is you press a button when you see a hazard, so something that would make you stop, slow down, or change direction in order to avoid a collision. And the key thing of this in timing is the faster you respond, the faster you press for that hazard within a defined scoring window, the more points that you're going to get. So simply, it's basically a measure of how fast you can detect those hazards on the road. So if we just move on to the next slide. Now, all of that's great, but is it just a test, or is it actually something a bit more than that? Well, it actually is. So it's not just a test hazard perception. It's actually what we call a cognitive skill. So it's a mental process that we can use to scan the road ahead and anticipate what might happen next, and making safe decisions, and how we make those safe decisions. And actually, research has shown that it is the only cognitive skill that has been consistently linked to crash risk. And that evidence has been built up over 60 years. There's lots of evidence that shows that drivers who are better at hazard perception are less likely to be involved in collisions. So I think one of my favourite studies, or one of the studies I think that demonstrates it the most, is a large study that was done in Australia that took 100,000 new drivers and got them to do a hazard perception test as they passed their driving test, and then they followed up 1 year later with police reported statistics on collisions. And actually, they found that those who had performed worse at their test after passing or on the test were actually more likely to have been killed in a fatal collision during that year. So it's a real strong indicator that that skill consistently links to crash risk. And we also see it with novice drivers, as Ria's mentioned. You know, that you're more likely to have a crash when you've just passed your driving test as well. So it can really tap into the skill of hazard perception, the skill of whether you're going to have a crash or not in the future. And I think it's really important to highlight that this is why it was brought in as part of the DVSA test in 2002. It isn't just there as an annoying part of your theory test to get through. It's there because there's evidence to show that training on it and passing that test will make your drivers safer on the road. Now, in the test that you have to pass as part of the DVSA test, you have to watch 14 different clips, and they all contain what we call developing hazards, and there's 15 of those. So one of those clips is containing 2 hazards within there. So the DVSA, what they do is they define this as a developing hazard as something that requires you to take action such as braking or steering to avoid a hazard. And you've got what you call a hazard window, and you can get a maximum of 5 points. So the faster you press, you get 5, and it goes down until you get 0 points. But I think the important thing, and this is for looking at the test, is where should your drivers be pressing for that developing hazard? So if we just move on to the next video slide, please. So if we just press play on this video here, this is what a test or a clip from the test might look like. This is actually one of our own clips. But it is very similar. It's made by the same company called JellyLearn that make the DVSA clips. And as you can see, you're driving along and you're coming up to a crossing, and that car sort of gets in the way of the pedestrian crossing. So where would we be pressing? Where would we think that is classed as a developing hazard? And that's what can be quite challenging for young learners to know, is actually, when is that a developing hazard? So if we just move on to the next slide, you'll see we've kind of got a bit of a timeline here. If we've just pressed next on it, it'll bring up like the windows there. That's perfect. Yeah. So as we can see, as we can go through here, this is where people would be scoring for it. So at 5, you would be getting, you could see that person's just sort of turning, and then it goes down all the way to 1 again. So having a look at that, if we just press next slide again, please. So here we go, a bit of a deeper dive on that one. At picture 1, we can see that pedestrian with the red top, he is what we call a potential hazard. So if we pressed at that point, we probably wouldn't score any points because he's not actually doing anything at that point. However, on the central picture, the pedestrians turned their head, and they are basically like a clue, what we call a precursor to the hazard, because they're actually looking into the road, and they are at this point what we would call a developing hazard. So if we press there, we would get our 5 points. And in picture 3, as we move along, that pedestrian's actually stepped into the road at that point. If we press at this point, we might get 1 point out of the 5. However, at that point, they are already technically a hazard. So depending on where the windows have been set, for this particular clip, you may or may not get the points. But as you can see, the developing hazard is really at that point where the pedestrian's turned and they're showing their intention. The driver has to read that clue of what's happening in that scene to be able to kind of predict what's about to happen next. So that's what we would class in this particular one as a developing hazard. Now, DVSA, they use computer generated imagery. We as a company, we like to use more video-based stuff. So if we just go on to the next slide, and press play on this one. This is an example of what we use, but it gives it's actually filmed rather than computer generated imagery, and we have kind of the overlay showing the mirrors and the different things here. But again, this is kind of what you would be seeing if you're actually as a driver within this particular clip, but really just put this in here to kind of show that there are different types of clips that can be used and different types of hazards that we can be seeing. So in this one, I think hazard's about to stop now or start now, and as you can see, hopefully the in the front of right in the beginning of the image, there'll be some flashing lights, and actually the car's having to stop because there is an oncoming emergency vehicle. So again, being able to read the road and know how to respond appropriately. So if we just move on to the next slide. So we've seen that hazard perception is a test and it is a gateway to getting a full driving license. However, the good news is that it is a skill, and I think it's really important to highlight that it can be learnt over time, and it does gradually and naturally develops over time. So the more hazards that we see and survive on the roads, the better, the more that experience gathers. So the theory is that every time you encounter a hazard, you take some of the rules from that hazard, you store that in your memory, so that when you encounter a similar situation in the road, you can extrapolate those rules and be able to use it in that scenario to help to be able to predict what's going to happen. So you don't need talent, you don't need a special aptitude, you really do just need practice. And with that, there is practicing, watching it. So on the road, what you can do is you can be talking through your hazards when driving with parents or with your instructors. And also, as you're probably all aware, there are various apps out there that you can use to practice on. And that will help you learn what to look for and what type of hazards can be encountered on the road. So again, parents can help by encouraging young drivers to actively look for them and talk to them about what might happen next. So thinking about, different scenarios, what could have happened here, why is that pedestrian turning their head, really getting them into thinking about not just looking at what's happening, but understanding the things that could possibly happen and which of those is going to be the most dangerous within there. So I think that's me done on there.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Victoria. That was really interesting. I love how you've brought like science into it and the Australian, what would you call that? Australian investigation?
Yeah, sort of a research. Yeah, I think it was an academic research.
Academic research, that's the right word for it. So thank you so much for coming along and sharing your knowledge. I just have a few questions on the back of it. We want to learn more, Victoria. We want to know more. So you've already mentioned how parents can support young drivers to build up their hazard perception skills, but we've had a question in the chat saying, do you know any specific names of apps or websites where they can head to?
Oh, that's a good one. Specifically, there are, off the top of my head, if you just kind of go on like the App Store on your mobile phone or on the computer, there are ones on there, I believe. I'm just trying to think of the main one. I think driving theory.
4-in-1, yeah.
Yeah, there's. I think if I'm correct in thinking that one of the top apps on Apple or on the other Android store, I believe, is theory test related. So anything that you buy that is theory test related, they tend to license content from DVSA that are like the official clips that they can use, and also they will use maybe their own clips that they've developed as well.
And my last question to you, thank you for answering that one, is after a learner has passed their theory test, how can parents support learners build on the knowledge and skill they have already learned?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really, really good question. And I think it's important to note that just because you've passed your theory test, it doesn't mean that you've fully developed the skill of hazard perception. It means that they've reached enough to pass the test. And I think at that point, learners think, oh, well, I've passed my theory test, I don't need to be practicing it anymore. But I think we really do. We know that hazard perception is linked to crash risk. And I think it's also important to note that research shows that there's no ceiling level on learning hazard perception as well. So even your really experienced drivers who've been driving for years, they don't just hit a level and they go, yeah, I'm the best at hazard perception. Even they can still learn and still get benefit from learning hazard perception. So we know that it's really important to keep practicing. So what we can be doing with that is by encouraging kind of discussion-based drives and encouraging, a bit like what I said earlier, learners to predict what's about to happen, not just react to road situations. Be thinking about, well, why is that pedestrian turning their head? Why is that lorry slowing down? Thinking about all the different things and having discussion based on that as well. So not just kind of, like say, reacting really, but really being able to understand how the things are interacting in the scene and talking through that and talking about the possible situations within there. I think that's what's really, really important, being able to recognize those patterns in driving as well. And once they start to recognize all of those things, then they'll be able to learn from them and predict as they go through themselves.
Right, well, lovely. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. And again, we will be hearing more from you at our roundtable and Q&A later on. So please don't go anywhere, Victoria. We need you. We need your knowledge. So again, just a quick roundup and summary of what lovely Victoria has taught us to make sure we're all on the same page in regards to hazard perception. So as Victoria showed us on her lovely PowerPoint, it is a skill that develops with both time and exposure. And I think young drivers simply haven't had enough of either yet, including me. So what parents can really help with is talking through what you spot as a driver and encouraging your young person to think ahead. What might happen next? If I turned out of this lane without indicating, what could have happened? Did you notice that driver? What was wrong with the decision that they made? So these small, regular conversations really help to build the judgment that keeps us safe later on in our driving journey. So we've had Terry, we've had Victoria. We are now on to another poll. No, we have another guest speaker. Oh my goodness, how could I forget about Amanda Lane? Amanda Lane is head of driving testing and training policy at DVSA, the official DVSA. So Amanda, are you here with us? Can we see you? Can we hear you? It's the question.
Hi, Rilla, I am here. Can you see me? Hopefully you
Yes,
can
I
see
can,
me.
I
Yes,
can,
you
I can see you and I can
That's
hear
good.
you.
That's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you to the Warwickshire Road Safety team that have asked me along this evening to have a little chat with you all. So I am Amanda Lane, as Ria said. I head up the driver testing and driver training policy team. I'm also the Deputy Chief Driving Examiner at the DVSA. I've been where you guys have been. I've got a son of 26 and a daughter of 24. And so, yeah, I taught both my children to drive. I've had many a discussion with them. And so I feel a little bit of your pain and the challenges you may be facing in that space with young people right now. So just a quick bit, I was a driving instructor quite a few years ago now, joined the DVSA as a driving examiner. I've done a little bit around error management of things, and now I've moved across into the policy and been in this space about 3 years. So I've got a little bit of of knowledge, and that hopefully you know, I can help and guide you the best I can this evening. And I'll be sharing that practical guidance on how you as a parent or guardian can play a really important role in helping your young person become a safe and competent driver. I quite often hear people say, oh, they really need to be confident before their test. Confidence worries me, because I'm not sure that confidence is a good thing. So we prefer them to be competent than confident. So yeah, next slide, please. So there's many ways that you can help your young person to learn to drive, and then that includes, you know, encourage them to get enough training and practice. You know, there's never too much. You can't do too much training. So anything you can do, you know, it is really, really important. Supporting the advice the driving instructor gives the learner. So listen to feedback from the driving instructor if you're not having those conversations, and see if you can instigate them, because it's really important to all be joined up on the journey. Supervising the learner in private practice sessions, if you can and you're able to. I mean, it's sometimes it's challenging, and we don't always have cars. Somebody's asked there to say they've got an automatic car and they're learning in a manual. You know, so when the time's right, you can have that conversation with the instructor. You know, is it right now? Is it the right time? Can they have a go in our automatic car? And there might be a couple of bits you need to do in that space first, so they understand the difference. But so yeah, if you're able to get out and practice with them, just make sure you've had that conversation with your driving instructor first to make sure they're probably at a level that you can do that between you and it add value. If you go a little bit too early, you might run the risk of a situation happening and you not being able to intervene. So always best to have that conversation with the instructor about when that might be the best time. And encourage them to only take the test when they're ready. And we talked earlier, didn't we? It's not just about being ready to take the test. So my biggest thing with teaching my children to drive wasn't about the test at all. It was about, do I feel safe to now let them go and drive on their own? And that's the key thing, isn't it? It's not about passing the test. It's, are you confident that they're fully in control of that vehicle? It's probably the riskiest thing, one of the riskiest things I'll ever do. So that's what we want to know, is, are they going to be safe to drive independently following their test? So one of the ways you can support your learner by encouraging them to get enough training and practice. So they go from being a novice to competent, safe driver by the training. So they learn new skills with their driving instructor, and then the practice, so gaining lots of experience. And most people learn to drive with a driving instructor. Driving instructors are the professionals, and they're trained to teach driving skills in a structured manner to suit differing abilities. So if your learner's at the very start of the learning journey, you can search for approved driving instructors on gov.uk by searching driving instructors, and hopefully that'll help. So if we go to the next slide, sorry, just so I'm keeping up. Holistic learning. So it's important to support holistic learning by encouraging your learner to take driving lessons before their theory test. So it is very much a joined up journey. And as we heard a minute ago about the theory test and hazard perception things, if you've already done some driving on the roads, it's actually easier and more understandable. We're aware at the moment we've got quite a lot of people that are doing their theory test before they're driving. So yeah, I think it's good to link it all in together. And our insight shows that 33.3% of learners aged 17 to 24 have had no driving lessons before their first theory test attempt. So that means that they're just not learning holistically. And data also shows that learners who had no lessons before their theory test had a 28.8% failure rate versus 21.3% for those who had lessons. So actually those people that had been out driving and had lessons were more likely to pass their theory test. And if learners start lessons before taking their theory test, they can see how the road rules are applied in real traffic situations. So it makes that theory come to life and more understandable. It also helps build their confidence with practical experience before taking either test. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the skills learners need to become a safe driver and prepare for the test. So there's 27 skills, and these are split across 8 groups. So we've got the basics, and then we move on to control and positioning, followed by observation, signalling and planning, and then on to junctions, junctions, roundabouts and crossings, various and different road types, manoeuvres. Just try to keep up with the slides. And then road types, which includes dual carriageways, country roads. Driving conditions, the more practice you can have in different weather conditions and different roads is really helpful. And then we've got the independent driving. So can somebody get in the car and drive independently themselves? So each of the 27 driving skills has 5 levels of progress. So it's really important to keep track of this whilst they're learning to drive. Level 1 is when something is first introduced by an instructor and learners are able to follow instructions. So that could be a full talk through. And then as the learner improves and moves through the levels, they'll get more independent until they reach level 5. And this is when they can reflect on their driving ability and adapt to those different situations. And then make those decisions to adapt rather than having to have the advice when something's not quite going as they may have practiced previously. So a good way to track that progress while learning to drive is to use the driver's record, which is displayed here. This can help you record any private practice you've done so the learner can talk about this with their instructor, and it gives you the opportunity to write any notes or anything that you might want to do. So if you're not around when your child goes for lessons, at least if you've got this document, you can write on it and fill it out and put the different bits and pieces on there. So it might help with that communication channels if you're not around when they're going for lessons. And learners who are consistently achieving level 5 have the skills to drive safely on their own. And then we would say that they were ready for their test, because it is about that driving safely on their own. That's the key bit. Next slide, please. So when it comes to booking the test, there's a few things you and your learner need to consider. So DVSA is making 3 changes to how learner drivers book and manage their car practical driving test appointments. So from the 31st of March 2026, only 2 changes can be made to a booking. And then from the 12th of May 2026, only learners are allowed to book a car driving test and make changes to their own booking. What you can do is you can sit with them and help them. So if they need your help, that's absolutely fine. You can log online and you can sit with them and you can talk them through it and go through it. But the learner themselves will need to confirm that they are the person whose test it is when they go through the booking process. And from the 9th of June 2026, learners can move their book test only to a nearby test centre. These changes mean that when your learner books a test, they need to make sure they're booking at a location where they want to take the test and have spoken with their instructor to book a date when they will be ready to take it. You can find out more about these changes on gov.uk, and also on gov.uk it will show you the other locations you can move a test to. So if you've already got a test booked in one location but it's after that date, it might be worth having a look just to check if you need to move it, where the locations are you can move it to. Next slide, please. So next I'm going to talk about supporting your learner with private practice. So before you start private practice, you need to ensure you're eligible. So you can supervise a family member or friend who is learning to drive as long as you're over at least 21 years old. You're qualified to drive the type of vehicle that they're learning in. For example, you must have a manual car licence if you're supervising somebody in a manual car. So where somebody asked earlier about an automatic, they would need the automatic. If it was the other way around, they were learning in an auto and you had a manual car, basically you've got to hold the license for the car that you're accompanying your driver in. You've got to have held a full driving license for at least 3 years. Now, that about people from the UK, the EU, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, as long as it's 3 years in any of those countries, and that you're not currently banned from driving. I know that sounds obvious, but it's just, it's just to be aware. So you must also have the correct insurance. So more guidance on this can be found on the Ready to Pass website. And when it comes to private practice, it's a good idea to speak to your learner's instructor before starting private practice. So I said earlier, have that conversation, make sure that they think they're at the right stage and they can advise when the learner is ready to drive under supervision, and they can help plan those practice sessions at the right level for you. If they've never done roundabouts and you don't know that, before you know, you can find yourself in the middle of quite a busy one with a learner who's going to maybe try and convince you that that's okay. It's important for you to support the advice the driving instructor gives your learner so that you can help them learn the skills they need and that they can drive safely. You can find the guidance on how to plan private practice sessions on gov.uk by searching Supervisor Learner Driver. Next slide, please. So our insight shows that 94% of learner drivers recommend taking a mock test to other learners. We take mock tests in so many other things, especially in education settings. It's quite a normal thing now to have a go and do a mock test, so a mock exam, before you'd ever dream of going and taking a real one. Driving is no different. It's exactly the same. The more you do that, the more you're putting yourself in that environment. And also then people are having to drive independently, and you can soon pick up on how that's going to work post-test. So I'd recommend encouraging your learner to ask their instructor for a mock test, and taking a mock test is a great way for learners to check they have all the skills they need to drive safely on their own. It will also help them understand if they're ready to take their driving test. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to have a quick chat about the driving test and some changes we made to the test last year. This was to make the test experience more reflective of the current everyday conditions motorists face and to better prepare learners for a lifetime of safe driving. So the adjustments we made were we reduced the number of normal stops during the test from 4 to 3. We stop a lot in the driving test. So we had a little look at this, we've reviewed it, and it was actually, we don't stop as many times, we can keep the wheels moving, and it's the wheels moving that's key. That's what we see when we're out looking. We can see how people are driving, how they're reacting with other traffic and things like that. So we did 2 normal stops, so we took one of the normal stops out. We've lowered the frequency of emergency stop exercise from 1 in 3 to 1 in 7. We have to go into quite quiet, non-busy roads to carry out emergency stops, as you can imagine, because we can't have other traffic around. By having them on 1 in 3, we were spending quite a lot of time in low risk, low speed areas. So by reducing it to 1 in 7, it now means that we can stay out of some of these low risk, low speed areas and spend a bit more time in those higher speed, higher risk areas, which adds value and ensures people are getting the right preparation for their test. And we've added flexibility to the independent driving segment. So now they can follow the full route on a sat nav. They might do some sat nav, some traffic signs. They might do all traffic signs. And some of it might run for the full duration of the test, or some might still be 20 minutes. So we've just added that flexibility, and it just adds that little bit of interest. So the changes were designed to improve the overall flow of the test and better reflect real world driving conditions, helping us develop safer and more competent drivers. And that was the aim of making those changes. Next slide, please. So when your learner is approaching their test, I would encourage you to ask them to use the Ready to Pass campaign checklist to check that they're ready. So they're usually ready to take their test when they don't need prompts from their driving instructor or yourselves. They do not make serious or dangerous mistakes when they're driving. They can pass their mock driving test. They've practiced ways of managing their nerves. That's a big one, isn't it? Nerves is really difficult. You can't take nerves away. They're really hard. And a little bit of nerves is quite good because it sort of makes you a bit more alert. But anything they can do that helps them manage their nerves on the day, because we just want them to see them drive to the best of their ability. So the last thing we want to do is make them more nervous than they need to be. And also the key thing is, has their driving instructor said they're ready? If the driving instructor has raised their concerns and they don't think they're ready for the test, I really would listen to that. We get people who come up for tests in their own cars and they'll tell us that their driving instructor said they couldn't come for their test, they weren't ready. That's a concern that that people are still then coming up, because the instructor's the expert in this, and so I really would listen to their advice. And if they can't check off everything on the list, they should probably think about moving their test to give themselves more time to practice. They can download a copy of the checklist on the campaign website. Next slide, please. So finally, when it comes to the day of the test, it's important to make sure your learner brings the right things with them, to make sure the test goes ahead and isn't cancelled for unavoidable reasons. So they have worked hard and spent a lot of money learning to drive. On the day of their test, make sure they bring their driving licence. Now that sounds really obvious. I won't give you the numbers of the amount of people that turn up without them, but it's actually quite a few. It cannot go without the actual driving licence. We can't accept a photo of it or anything else. It has to be the actual licence. So make sure it's in a safe place, make sure they've got it on the morning, put it in a safe place in the car, wherever you like, just make sure they've got it. And another one's a bit odd, make sure they bring a car with them. So first of all, make sure they bring a car. We have people turn up without them, but also make sure that car is suitable. So if they are coming up in their own car, make sure it meets the rules of what it needs to do for the driving test. And you can read the rules on using your own car on the Ready to Pass campaign website. So please, if you're going to use your own car, do go on and have a look. We don't want you to waste your journey and your time. Arrive at the driving test 5 minutes before the appointment time. Use a route planner to plan the route to the test centre, allowing extra time for traffic, especially during those busy periods. So even if I'm going 40 minutes up the road, I'd probably put on Google Maps and have a quick look. Other satellite navigations are available. And next slide, please. So for more information on what we've covered today, you can visit the Ready to Pass website, which has loads of useful information for you and your learner to help them learn the skills to be a safe driver and prepare for their test. You can scan the QR code there and that'll take you direct to the website. I think the slides are going to be shared afterwards, so you'll be able to go on and scan them then as well. Next slide, please. So as well as the Ready to Pass website, there is the Safe Driving for Life info, and it has a range of resources to support the learner to drive journey and staying safe on our roads. This includes e-learning modules and official DVSA learning materials for both the theory and practical driving test. You can find out more about these by scanning this QR code. And we also have a 20% discount code for the learning materials, which is up on the screen now, but this is not valid for bundles or the apps. And thank you. So
Lovely. Well,
summary.
thank you.
So the summary is to encourage your learner to get enough training and practice. That's key. Encourage holistic learning. Support the advice the driving instructor gives you and your learner. Supervise the learner in private practice sessions and track progress where possible. Encourage the learner to only take their driving tests when they're ready. That's the key one. And visit the Ready to Pass website. And it's not just about only take the test when they're ready. Only take the test when they're ready to drive safely and independently following their test. But thank you for listening.
Lovely. Thank you, Amanda. You even did my summary for me.
Sorry.
Let's talk. No, I'm happy. I'm like, yes, thank you. That was so interesting. I'm glad that you dived into a lot of different topics. And I think what I got from that was more is better. Do as much training and driving as you can. And I didn't realize that actually the driving tests are getting changed now. So I think that's really useful to know.
We made some minor changes. It's just about keeping it relevant and current, isn't it? And where are the risks? You know, what are the risks for young people? And we know that if we cover this in test, then people will practice it in their learning to drive journey. So, yeah, the test is always kept under review to make sure it's current.
So I'm just going to ask you one teeny tiny question, Amanda. So you did mention we might not have an Amanda at home where you can teach us how to drive, how you did with your 2 kids. So how can we find the best instructor? I know you said to go on the government website, but what can parents look for?
I think the main thing to look for is there's two types of instructors. So you've got your ADI, which is your approved driving instructor, and they're people that are now fully qualified. They've passed all 3 of our tests to become a fully qualified driving instructor. So they've had their teaching ability assessed. They're registered with DVSA and they're regularly checked to make sure their standards stay high. So the ADIs have to display a green certificate in their windscreen. It's quite small, a little square thing, sometimes referred to as a badge. They have to legally display that when they're teaching people to drive for hire and reward. The other type of driving instructor are potential driving instructors, and these are driving instructors that are still in training. And the difference is they will have a pink certificate, so same size, it's just pink and not green. So they've passed their first 2 tests to become an instructor. Those first 2 tests is a theory test and a practical driving test, but they're still learning the instructional part of the test and they haven't passed that final part. So they are allowed to teach for a limited period while they gain experience. So that's what so the reason for the pink certificates is for them to be able to go out and teach people to drive and them gain experience, for them to build their skills so that they can then go on and complete their qualification journey. They can be very good, but they're still developing, they're still learning their teaching skills and they're not quite fully qualified. So I think that's the thing maybe to be aware of is to, have a look, just check to see which certificate they've got in the window. You know, it's up to you which ones you use, but just so you understand what's out there. And as for a good instructor, it's about matching learning styles. So just not all instructors suit everybody, and I think sometimes when we get an instructor because our mates told them they're really good and then you're not really getting on with them, it might just be that your particular type of learning style doesn't match that instructor, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to move instructors if you're not getting on and you're not gaining from it. You know, have a conversation, but it might be that you need to try and find somebody else that does match your learning style. We're all very different, and we all learn very differently. So if we're not learning or making progress, then, you know, it might be that you have a conversation with the instructor and they do something different, or it might just be that somebody else might match your needs slightly differently.
Lovely. Well, thank you for answering all the question. Again, we're going to hear from Amanda later on. So before we do move on to our rapid table and open the floor to our Q&A, sounds a bit like traitors, doesn't it? Q&A. Let's quickly bring together the key messages from tonight. We love a good summary. So learning to drive isn't just about mastering the controls. It's about building judgment, experience, and safe habits that last, which lovely Amanda has just told us all about. And parents play an incredibly powerful role in that, which Terry taught us. So here are some simple things to take away. Give learning enough time and include variety, different roads, different routes. Confidence grows quickly. Judgment takes longer. Amanda, what was that saying? Confidence is not Confidence v competence, is that what you said?
Competence, yeah. You want them to be competent, not confident.
Yes, that's the one. I'm going to take that away. Build variety, not just miles, different roads, different weather, different times of day. The more situations they see while driving, the safer they'll be later. Use short, regular, structured conversations and talk about why. Everyday driving is full of teachable moments. Ask, what did you notice? What might happen next? How would you have handled that? Or you can give little anecdotes, what you may have done wrong. So we can plan for tricky moments. We can create the if and then plans and write them down. Or if you're unsure at a junction, you can just stop and reassess. So these tiny reflections build safer decision making long after the test. I think all three speakers have echoed that it's not about the test, it's about the longevity of making sure a young driver can drive safely on the road long before they finish the test. But so by supporting time, variety, and reflection, you're not just helping them pass, you're helping them become safer, more confident and competent, more thoughtful drivers for years to come. Now, I can now say we have had all of our lovely speakers. We're now at the last part of our evening, our rapid roundtable, our Q&A, where I present some questions to our lovely three speakers. Now, I know we've had a few questions in the chat, so we have been monitoring those, so we'll maybe bring some of those up now. Perhaps you haven't asked a question yet and you'd like to ask the three guest speakers something, so now is the time to drop it in the chat. If you are leaving us now, you're not staying for our Q&A. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you've learned something. Again, all the resources will be sent on a link, so you can rewatch this, send this to friends or families, and gain more resources. So I think we're going to start with our round table. Speakers, are you ready? I'm going to fire some questions at you from our lovely attendees. Who shall I choose first? Terry. You're back. Hello, Terry. So someone said their local driving instructor seems to only offer 2-hour lessons at £30 an hour. So that's £60 per lesson per week. So a few have said that this is so they can travel further and consolidate learning, but other people say that 2 hours is too much and the learner driver tires and stops taking on new information. Are there any thoughts on this? Would you recommend it? Yeah.
Well, so there's two parts to this. The first is the slightly unpleasant part, which is that as driving instructors, we run a business. And if you imagine a driving instructor's day, let's say we're doing 6 hours of lessons, it's a hell of a lot easier for us to do 3 2-hour lessons than it is to do 6 1-hour lessons. That's the cold truth of it. And that's why a lot of instructors will go for those 2-hour lessons. And on the flip side, which is from the pupil's perspective, I think the key thing to remember is everyone's different. Some people will get tired with 2-hour lessons and they might not, or, I've seen in the chat about neurodiverse people, some people will struggle to maintain focus. It's not necessarily getting tired, but they struggle with focus for that length of time. So that's where a good instructor comes in, or a flexible instructor comes in. I shouldn't say good. And if you're looking for an instructor and you know that you don't want 2-hour lessons, or you know that you do want 2-hour lessons, ask that instructor, are you going to be flexible with this? It's generally my starting point is 2 hours, generally on my lessons, and I'll adapt them to suit the pupil, and I'll adapt them to suit me. If I've got a headache one day, I'm potentially saying to that pupil, could we do 90 minutes today? And I think the other thing I would just chip in with this, I know there's a quick fire, so I apologise, but the other thing I would chip in with this is if you are getting tired within a 2-hour lesson, think about how that's going to affect you once you pass your test and you're driving on a motorway for 2 hours. If you want to be planning in those breaks, potential lesson, the same way you'll plan them in on a longer drive, because a lesson shouldn't be 2 hours of solid driving. Almost never. So you should do a section of driving, whatever it is you're practicing, pull up, reflect on it, look at what you're doing next, then go again. So you're almost getting a mini break in between. So yes, 2 hours can be tiring. Generally, most people do find it okay, but if you're not, find someone that's flexible. And when you're getting that instructor, if you find someone that only does 2 hours and you want 1 hour, well, that's not the right instructor for you.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Terry. That was very interesting. I know some people are saying thank you and leaving, but please do stay. we've still got more to learn. Amanda, Victoria, and Terry both want to drop some more gems for us to take away. But if you do have to leave, then that's understandable. But if not, please do stay. We'd love for your questions to be answered and for you to drop some more into the chat. So thank you, Terry. Victoria, I'm going to ask you a question. We've gotten a question. Someone has said, how do you think parents can help their young person develop good hazard perception skills while they're growing up as passengers?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good one. And I think, Terry, you touched on it earlier about how when kids are in the car as well, you're demonstrating kind of like how you're behaving in front of them, and they're picking up those habits kind of, you know, as they're growing up, as it were. So, you know, I think it's important because it does really start a lot earlier than we think. You know, even as passengers, we can be developing those skills of hazard perception. So we can kind of do this before learning to drive by maybe talking through the drive. So, for example, that car might pull out, that pedestrian looks like they might cross, getting them thinking about what's going on, not just sitting there possibly just listening to you if you're getting a bit of road rage or things like that, but be talking about, you know, what's going on in the scene and explaining why you're doing things as well. So, you know, we're slowing down because traffic is building up ahead, you know, those kinds of things, getting them to question why you're doing what you're doing and how you're reading the road. And it gets them thinking about why you're behaving in certain ways, obviously all the positive ways though. Hopefully that answers the question.
You definitely answered that. Thank you so much, Victoria. Amanda, we're going in chronological order here, just out of habit. What are the pros and cons of taking a driving test in your own car via a driving instructor's car?
So that's a really good question, isn't it? And I think it depends on what you normally drive and what you feel confident in. You know, some people prefer their own car, and because actually they drive to work and back every day, and then they might go and drive between that as well, they actually feel a bit more confident in their own vehicle. So not confident, a bit more competent in their own vehicle. They feel you know, more at ease, that maybe not so nervous because they've had that practice. So but I don't think it matters whether you choose your instructor's car or your own car. If you choose your own car, that's absolutely fine. You just need to make sure, like I said earlier, it's suitable for the test. What you don't want to do is turn up with your own car and then something not be right with it. We do check the MOT on cars that present for tests, and you won't believe how many we have that haven't got an MOT and the test can't go. Warning lights, we have cars turn up with warning lights on, again they can't go. So you're absolutely fine to use your own car if that's what you feel more competent in and comfortable in, absolutely fine. But yeah, just make sure it meets that criteria. But if you're used to driving your instructor's car and that's the car that you've had most of your lessons in, and actually you feel in a better place to come with them in that vehicle, then do that. So it's about you, it's about, you know, how you've come to get to the be ready for your test, and how you've gone on that journey basically, and what will give you the best chance to display the best of your driving to the examiner, so that you walk away with the positive result if you're ready to do so.
Right, so you'd say it's all about personal preference, really?
Definitely, yeah. I wouldn't say it's one or the other, to be honest. And it's difficult, isn't it? I've got people that have attended for tests that have driven quite a long way from another area because it's the only place they can get a test, and quite often sometimes they drive so well because they're so then they don't know the surroundings, they don't know the areas or anything like that, so they're so aware of the road markings, the traffic signs and everything else because it's so new to them. Some of my best drivers are people that have never even driven in the town where the test centre is previously. So yeah, it depends on all those different factors, really.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm just going through the chat now, and I've seen Victoria ask, what advice would you give to pick the best driving instructor? So I know we have touched on this, but if we could just give some quick fire bullet points to Victoria. Anyone, whoever wants to answer that.
I'll chip in with this, and I'll first of all echo what Amanda said initially a little while ago, because I thought she made some really good points there. But I think this is the key word, I think, because it's what's best for you. And again, Amanda alluded to this, but if you're after someone that's specialised in working with neurodiverse people, or sorry, Amanda, but someone that builds up confidence, or you know, any of those things, then that's the best instructor for you. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the best instructor. Maybe even you want someone that doesn't care about road safety and you want someone to get you through the test as fast as humanly possible. Well, there's even those instructors there, and I don't recommend them, but that's going to be the instructor that you want. And the way to find those, first of all, ask people who've passed the test. Don't necessarily go off reviews, and that might sound slightly weird, but generally when people leave a review, it's after they pass the test. So they're going to generally say the nice thing about the instructor because they've passed the test. Actually ask the person, ask them some questions about the instructor. The other thing I'd say is find their social media, find the websites, look at what they're actually talking about on there. Are they solely talking about a driving test? If that's all you're interested in, then that's probably an instructor for you. Are they talking about things like the additional training they might do, things like a Pass Plus, things like neurodiversity? Are they talking about this stuff? Then great, lean in towards them. And then the other thing I'd say is, again, have a conversation with that instructor. Never be afraid to reach out to them and say, look, can I speak to you? Because most of us will. And again, the ones that don't probably aren't the right instructor for you. And again, go back to what I said at the beginning. Ask any questions you've got, any. So to find the best instructor, again, look at the reviews, speak to the people they've been with, look on their social media, and just find someone you're drawn to, and then start off with that conversation. And again, just repeating what Amanda said one more time. I've had people come to me before where they've had 2 or 3 first lessons with someone else, but they've not been right, so they've come to me. And never be afraid to change instructor if they're not right for you. Yes, there's a waiting list for some, but you don't want to be sat in a car for 40 hours with someone you can't stand, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, believe it or not, Terry, I went through 5 driving instructors.
It's quite
5.
impressive. That might be
I
a record
know.
for me.
I was just interviewing them all. So thank you so much for answering all that question. That is the end of our roundtable. We have our final poll. We love a poll. We love summaries and we love a poll. The question is, what will you take away from today's webinar? So just take a moment to think about just one thing you'll try in the next week. It could be a conversation, a practice drive, or simply planning together with your young person. Your support genuinely makes young drivers safer. So if you can't access the poll, just type it in the chat. Just one thing you take away from today's webinar. We've learned so much with our 3 guest speakers, and I'm so grateful that they were able to join. Thank you for giving up an hour of your evening. And thank you for joining to our attendees as well. It's been a great evening.
Just while they're filling that poll, can I just make one comment?
Please do.
Because Brian said in the chat, he's asked about how, I think he means parents, how parents can get more involved in driver safety. That's one of the big things we were speaking about today is speaking to your child, speaking with the person that's learning, getting involved with them, even if you're not in the car, but talking to them and asking them what they'll do in certain situations, talking to the instructor, but also reaching out to your local road safety organisations like this one and just dropping them an email and saying, what can I do? Looking on social media and seeing if you can find some of the other road safety organisations about. And even if the very only thing you do is share some of that content on your social media, that's ridiculously beneficial because it gets seen by more people. So just starting small with little things like that, I think can be a big thing, and obviously that can lead to even bigger things.
Lovely. Well, thank you for answering that extra little question. And I'm sure our poll has now been completed. So thank you once again. Thank you so much to our speakers and to all of you for joining us. We'll hope you'll join us again. We have our next webinar in October, which will focus on supporting young drivers after they pass their test. So before you go, please do complete the survey. I believe the link should be in the chat and the QR code is on the screen. Just get your phone out and take a little photo of that. So we hope you have a wonderful evening. And once again, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with us. And I cannot thank our guest speakers enough. It has been great from hearing your knowledge and answering all the questions that parents have. I think you've really made a big impact on young people and how we view driving. So thank you once again. I can see in the chat everyone's just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. It was very informative, and I think it echoes how we all feel about the 3 guest speakers. So thank you guys once again. And with that, I think we will be leaving the chat, ending the event. Again, if you did want to access this video, we also do have the link. This has all been recorded. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.